I woke up one night and I kid you not, I thought I was going to die. I just remember hugging my daughter, who was 5 years old at the time. She was sleeping beside me, hugging her so tight while trying not to wake her up. I was in a space where I felt that a lot of my values were being challenged, and my principles and what I thought was right was really being tested. And because of traffic at that time, I would take 4-hour drives every day. Should I rent so that I take away the 4-hour grind? I could not take that because it would mean that I would not see my kids every day. I would not be present in their lives.
Dreaming about something is one thing, but actually leaving a stable paycheck is a whole different story.
Yeah, there will be times I would tell myself, okay, I don't think I'm going to have a salary this month.
There's nothing compared to like the freedom of owning your time.
I would never trade the time that I have to be able to fetch my kids almost every day and, be present at all of their school events. You just need to start and then embrace that there's a lot of uncertainty. You will eventually, hopefully, find your product market fit. If I could travel back in time and talk to my younger self, I would probably tell myself, take the leap earlier.
Welcome back to another practical leadership series here in Lumpia Bytes. So today we're going beyond corporate leadership. We're exploring the kind of leadership you need when you decide to build something of your own and step into entrepreneurship. Because starting something from scratch is not just about having a great idea, it's about learning to lead in a space that's uncertain, messy, and full of risk. Mooch, why don't you introduce our special guest today?
So this person is a highly respected corporate leader with over 29 years in the tech industry. OG, kung OG. He has led the development of platforms, mobile apps used by millions and millions of Filipinos, and was part of the pioneering team that built one of the Philippines' largest AI-powered chatbots. Over the years, he's worn many hats, from technologist to corporate leader, and now founder. But what makes his story truly special is how his most important role is dad, and how that role has shaped his mission and purpose. He first ventured into edtech by co-founding Bihasa, a leading digital learning platform that delivers enterprise-grade training solutions for organizations. Today, he is the CEO and co-founder of Gia, an AI-powered, student-first education platform that is reimagining how Filipino students learn and prepare for exams. But beyond technology, he's an advocate for safe and accessible AI for every Filipino student. So I'm very, very proud to introduce my co-founder in GIA, our CEO, Mark Cruz.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of your listeners. And a great pleasure for me to be here with both of you today. So thank you so much for this opportunity and for inviting me, and of course for that warm introduction, which I really appreciate it.
Wow, that was an intro, and I think it really shows that this is the kind of guest that we really wanted to have, Mark, because your experience from corporate to putting up your own the startup life, and this is very timely because we have a lot of people or audience in our podcast that's really start thinking of starting their own, right? I think with the rise of AI, there's a lot of opportunities. We're thinking about new businesses, but there's also a lot of risk and uncertainties in the workplace, in the corporate workplace. And I know a lot of them are thinking really of putting up something of their own. So it's really, really timely. And this is full circle moment as well. I think trying to recall one moment from our HP days when I was fresh out of college and you guys were all in the meeting room, right, with all the leaders that time. And we were thinking, who's blue and who's green on those? That rivalry between Ateneo and LaSalle.
Yeah,
Fresh out of college, so we were thinking, like, sino yung green, sino yung blue, and how they work together. And I know you're in education and, these schools, right, are still close to your heart. So we're really, really excited to hear your story.
thanks
So
so
I
much.
guess maybe we can start with the moment that you first thought, maybe it's time to leave corporate life. Bring us back to that light bulb moment that, okay, I think I wanted to go entrepreneurship. I wanted to start on my own. What's going through your mind?
Wow, that's a great first question, G. So a little bit of a history lesson. Um, when I first graduated from college, well, 29 years ago, apparently, I had two goals in mind. No? First was to be eventually become a businessman. So it's what you call an entrepreneur today. At that time, it was called businessman. So that's one. The second one, and this is a bit cheesy. It will sound a little bit cheesy, is that I wanted to have a BMW. That was clear. I was a big car guy. I used to be a big car guy. I probably still am a bit. But those were the two things that were clear to me as I remember walking into the office building and telling myself, eventually I want to become a businessman, own my own business, and I'm going to drive a BMW someday. So that was clear. So fast forward 29 years, and I guess the thought of being a businessman faded in the background. No, as my career, I guess, accelerated. There was a lot of work. I got married and had my own family. So it wasn't really on I guess on my plate. I didn't have the time for it, right? And back in 2018, I was at a point in time where I felt that I was just one job level away from getting a car plan that would allow me to buy a BMW, a car plan that would allow me to get a BMW. But then I guess at that moment in time there were three things that were very present in my life, no, that pushed me to take that leap. First was I although I really enjoyed the area, I was managing a space that allowed me to launch and manage digital products that a lot of Filipinos would use every day. So the technology that we're using, I really enjoyed it because I felt that it was impacting Filipino lives. No? But then in the background, I was in a space where I felt that a lot of my values were being challenged, and my principles and what I thought was right was really being tested. And I knew the path was ahead of me. The path was clear, but I could never cross that line.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember that one morning driving to work, I eventually called my mom and I shared to her, "Ma, this is what's happening at work. I just can't do it. I cannot do it. I cannot cross that line." And then I even remember I was crying on the way to work. And then what my mom shared, really nice words of wisdom to me. He told me was that um, it's hard to live if you do not have quote unquote peace of mind. If you do not have peace of mind, maybe it's time to walk away, right? So the second one was leading up to the decision was because of work and because of traffic at that time, I would take 4 hour drives every day, 2 hours going, 2 hours going back home. Um, and coupled with the stress, I was eventually already thinking, am I going to should I rent uh, a condo in BGC so that I take away the 4 hour grind, no? Um, but then I could not take that because it would mean that I would not see my kids every day. I would not be present in their lives. Yes, I could call them, FaceTime them and stuff like that. But I just could not imagine not having the chance to hug my kids every day. That was a second. The third one, and I think that was really the kicker, and all of these three things were happening at the same time, was that um and I don't share this a lot to a lot of people, but one night I woke up. I was in the middle of a very, very stressful week. No, I woke up one night and I kid you not, I thought I was going to die. I had that. I had that feeling that, oh my god, am I going to die? And I just remember hugging my daughter, who was 5 years old at the time. She was sleeping beside me, hugging her so tight while trying not to wake her up. And I just found myself crying. And with all of those three things happening, and I guess in more or less the same space. I decided to leave corporate without a job waiting for me. It was it was just not something that I could continue doing. And I just said, okay, this is it. This is not worth it. I guess
Wow.
is the mindset that I felt at that time. And of course, from there it then gave me the space to um, reflect, take a step back, and I guess through some coincidence by God, and it happened nga while attending simbang gabi in Ateneo. I found the answer. I found another pathway, and that was through becoming an entrepreneur and starting up my first startup. Yeah.
Wow. There's so much in there. I'm trying to unpack it. Just hearing that, I think it's so heavy.
Mm,
There's so much going on. It's I think it's very common. The time I've heard stories where
mm,
they're gonna leave corporate because of the time for the family, right? But I think probably you're the first person I've that I heard that the values that you're fighting for as well is being challenged, right? And that's something that you cannot take anymore, that you won't give in anymore. That takes courage. Like personally for me, I think that's especially not having a job or not having anything concrete. So I'm
yeah,
not sure how you did that.
it was a huge leap, man. So
What are the fears that you wrestle with? It doesn't. It's not like an overnight decision, right? You
mm,
went through that process, but what were the fears that you wrestle with before taking that leap? Is it more financial? Is it
mm,
is it career that you're gonna lose the career that you
mm.
worked for this amount of years, or it's more like could be identity related that you might lose your identity? What's the biggest fears that you wrestle with?
Yeah. Of course, one of the biggest fears was financials. No.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I was a breadwinner compared to my wife. My wife is also working in IT, but hands down, I had the bigger salary, right? And to suddenly cut that off was a huge blow to our financials. No. That was one. The second one, the second, of course, was career also. There was no level. There was nothing certain if I could actually land another job that would pay me somewhere around that range. And also a place where I would love. No, I mean, I guess in a certain way, I was spoiled also with uh, the environment that I was in with Hewlett Packard, and the family and the togetherness and the sense of shared passion and vision that I found there. I really enjoyed it. So there was a real risk there. Can I find another job? Um, but but thankfully, my wife was very supportive. I was having a conversation with my wife all throughout this what I was experiencing, and so she's my rock. She has been supportive every step of the way ever since. Of course, we've been together all throughout, and I wouldn't know where I would be without, or this family or this household. Where would it be? Where would we be without her? Um, but also, I guess in order to address that fear of the financial aspect, I had to had our financials in order. So I look at all of our financials and make sure that I had enough runway, that my kids were, we would still be able to put food on the
Mhm.
table while I was still trying to figure out what my next step would be, right? Yeah, I think those would be the two primary fears, but at the same time, what helped me overcome those fears. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's not easy. I mean, like having a supported wife, same as me. I think we're somehow in the same boat in that time when we left corporate. But they have a saying that dreaming about something is one thing, but actually leaving a stable paycheck is a whole different story.
Yeah.
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 That
Mm,
stability, right? My God. That's a big transition. Getting away from the stability, the certainty
Mm,
of being in the corporate, emotionally detaching yourself from that one. Right.
mm,
But looking back, do you have any? Did you wish that you've done something differently? Looking
mm.
back with what you, is there anything that you felt like, if you're gonna do this all over again, let's say looking back, what do you think you should have done differently?
That's a great question. In fact, I do have an answer ready for that. Because I remember telling one of my friends, Jason, this one time. It was on in when I started this entrepreneurship journey. If I could travel back in time and talk to my younger self, I would probably tell myself, um, take the leap earlier. Take the leap earlier. I think, although that being said, as I stuck in corporate longer, looking at the positive side, I did learn a lot more and gain a lot more experience. But clearly, if I had the chance to go back, I would do it earlier, right? Without maybe without having the responsibility of taking out a loan for this house, for example, and getting married and having all of the um, accountability and time needed to raise a family properly, right? I would have done it earlier.
Yeah, like 100%. I think there's lesser risk, there's less responsibility. So if you have an opportunity to do that early, and if it's your dream, like,
Mm.
do it. Cool. All right. After that transition from corporate, now you're in the startup life, the entrepreneurship life. What was the biggest surprise for you when you first step into the startup life?
What was the biggest surprise to me? I don't know if you would call it surprise, but it would be, I guess, an aha moment when we launched my first startup Bihasa in January 2020, right? And then 3 months later, the pandemic hit. Right, the pandemic hit. The world got uh, turned upside down. There was a lot of chaos. We on our end, we started off as a B2C company. Actually, we started off as a B2C company, and I honestly thought we were going to go down. We're this ship is going to sink because of uh, our business model was not fit for the time because everyone was cutting, I guess, tightening their wallets, and a lot of our partners actually said and backed out. And maybe this is not the right time to invest. So, but thankfully, we survived through all of those ups and downs. And I remember telling one of my friends when they were asking, "Oh, how's the life of an entrepreneur?" And then I shared to them that I now appreciate whenever I talk to an entrepreneur, I would always hear them say, sa awa ng Diyos, or thank God, by the grace of God, sa awa ng Diyos. Uh, so it's an aha moment wherein that was a feeling that probably I said or felt a good number of times because I really felt that, oh, this is it. You know, money funding is gonna run out. There's no future and stuff like that. We're gonna sink. But thankfully, sa awa ng Diyos, thank the Lord, somehow we landed the client, money came in, and we were able to survive all of those ups and downs to a point where I felt it was stable enough for me to take a step back, because we were able to weather that storm. So, yeah, so it was not really a surprise or shock, but more of a realization of being an entrepreneur, and but I think by with everything, all of the successes and ups and downs, somehow with the grace of God, He finds a way to help you.
That's true. Some people probably call it, there's an element of luck, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
some, there's an element
truly.
of hope and faith
Mm,
as well on what you're doing. And because of the all the uncertainties along the way, yeah, you just have to be hopeful and faithful, I'd say, right?
mm.
And personally for you, how did you keep yourself grounded with all the chaos and uncertainty? Do you have a routine? Are you doing something different, or maybe not different, but how do you keep yourself grounded with all the chaos and uncertainty?
I think, Yeah, I think it's a change of mindset, really, that I learned and appreciated over time, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty, but but it's also to be honest, a lot of fun to go through that journey of learning. I mean, um, I remember telling this to a number of people who has asked me. I think you just need to start. You need to start. You have a business idea. You just need to start. It's not perfect, right? But as long as you're able to embrace that uncertainty and be agile enough to pivot 1 week. So we were like pivoting 1 week to the next. We were thinking, oh, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. Oh, this didn't work, that worked, right? And eventually, after I think 3 years, um, surprisingly, after 3 years, we came to a point that, oh, all right, this is the business model, this is the operating model, this is how our cost is going to look like at the base, and then these are all of the different products that we will offer to our clients, right? But I think, you know, you just need to start and then embrace that there's a lot of uncertainty. You will eventually hopefully find your product market fit, right? um and I remember one thing, and this is something that I added to, I guess, my arsenal, is that, I credit this to Muchi, said, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because if no one signs up, it's a data point, right? It's a data point that will tell you that, um it's a data point to tell you that, okay, that's not working, try something else. And if you look forward to those, I guess, data points, so borrowing from what I learned from Muchi, everything is a data point. You understand, and you that goes into, as you refine your final product over the years. It's not going to be overnight. What I also appreciated is that, learn to take the failures, embrace the challenge, and then continuously learn, and then somehow you find a way with all of these data points, into a product that you can say that you built yourself together with, the people that you had the opportunity to work with, so yeah, I
Gotcha.
think that's my response to that.
Yeah. So basically, you keep yourself grounded by that mindset shift, and embracing the uncertainty, and
Mm,
really just keep on trying to experiment on things,
mm.
taking action. Really, the bias and action, right? You can't just plan and plan. You have to take something, even
Yeah,
though you think that it's going to, yeah, like what you said, no signups. That's fine because at least you know what to do next, right? That's
it didn't
good.
work, so try something
Yeah.
different.
That's true. That's true. There's really no secret sauce. I think that's what people loves in entrepreneurship. The people who get that excitement from trying new things, right? What's
Mm.
in startup life or in the entrepreneurship life that you really like, that you didn't see in the corporate life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, for one, the speed is something that I really appreciate when you're a smaller team, and there's no red tape, or there's no politics involved, and you can just move in one direction together, try it. If it doesn't work, try something different. Definitely that's one. I think what I also liked is that I could, together with my co-founders, create the culture that we want. I think that's something that I really like. That, as compared to in a corporate environment where you're, more often than not, no, you're already joining an organization that has a set culture already, and it can be quite tough to try to change that from as one person. No, I think we had, when we joined Hewlett Packard in 2003 2004, we had this unique opportunity of growing a 200 man organization into, I guess, at the peak, I think around 6,000. We had the opportunity to be able to create our own culture in that, and that's a very tough situation to find. And when you build and launch your own startup, your own business, you're able to set what kind of culture Do you want the team to have? What is your expectations on how people would behave with each other? How will we treat our partners? How do we treat our clients, and so on? And of course, the processes also is something that you can dictate with the end goal of being able to say, "I built this. I built this." Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's really that fulfillment that
Mm.
you've built something, that you're the one who set the culture based on your values, right? And one thing I wanted to mention as well, this is why a lot of big tech companies here, for example, they love hiring founders
Mm.
because they know that these are the people who can do problem solving, do the scrappy things to make things happen. Like what you said, they're fast, right? And
Mm.
if you're in the big companies, there's a tendency that you're going to be slow. So they wanted to hire founders, the founders mentality where this things can go faster, right? And also setting up that culture because they have very specific values of culture that they wanted to set. So
Mm.
that's a really really good insights in there.
Wow, grab it. Thank you for sharing your story. It's very, as usual, very Mark to be so transparent, honest, and vulnerable all at the same time and be nonchalant with it. I didn't even know that. I mean, we've been working together for almost 2 years, I think more than that. And I didn't know that what you went through. I'm going to have to ask you maybe outside of this podcast deeper questions after that. But I could totally relate because when I left corporate, I was at that same point, literally crying on my way to work. I didn't want to resign. I didn't want to leave. But it was the traffic that was killing me. And I was having nightmares for months, like existential nightmares for months. And I didn't really want to leave because you guys created a culture and a team and a company that was really, I felt like home to me. But it was the logistics of it all that was really like gruesome, I would say. To give the viewers, to give the listeners kind of like a sneak peek into that world, maybe a little bit of pros and cons. Like, how are these worlds different? What would you tell them that here are the things that you should consider before jumping into this type of life? So, pros and cons, not necessarily something's better than the other, but here are a few considerations that you need to think about before making that big jump.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've had the opportunity to talk to a couple of fresh grads, or some are actually still in college right now, and they ask me, "Can you give me advice on career and stuff?" So what I've always found myself saying is that when you have your own business, of course, one, you have your own time, you can manage your own time, right? Which of course then translates to me being able to spend and be a lot more flexible with the time I spend with my family. So that's one pro, right? Uh, but then the con of that is, of course, there's always that constant when you're an entrepreneur, especially when you're starting up. No, um, there will be times I would tell myself, okay, I don't think I'm going to have a salary this month. So that has actually happened a couple of times, no? Because of cash flow, the we have this we need to pay our suppliers, and I want to make sure that we are in integrity with when we say uh when a partner renders work, we pay them on time and at the amount that they want. But at the same time, the revenue didn't come in at the time that you needed it. So there are times that you'll have to be able to uh, accept that as a reality as an entrepreneur, So those are some of the pros and cons. That being said, so going back to my story on the advice I give to the fresh grads and even undergrads today, I always find telling them that you should still get corporate experience. I always tell them that, no. The reason being is that in when you go into corporate, you will now get the experience of how an actual company works. What are the different functions? What are the best practices? What are not best practices? And stuff like that. Types of leaders that you would want to emulate, and also some leaders you would not want to emulate and not copy. No, one particular example was that I love hiring people from Accenture, they immediately know what they needed to do because they were so trained in a very well structured organization. It was a well oiled machine when you get that experience. And when they came into HP, they were they knew immediately what they needed to do, what standards, what processes, what templates. You didn't need to tell them. And I use that same experience because um there will be a lot of like pros and cons when you go into corporate, but you need to have those ups and downs and the experience of being in a corporate environment so you can then take not in when you're building your own startup, when you're going into your own business. It's not just concepts now. It's not just you're learning while you're building. You already have some experience and some frameworks that you can take to your startup, and of course take the best practices that you want to copy, both in terms of processes and also culture, right? And then make that into your own when you get into your startup. So again, no, in terms of like pros and cons, going back into my own experience, as you said, three worlds, which to I saw, I got the opportunity in Hewlett Packard to be able to work with a lot of very passionate people, uh, who, who at the end of the day they had their own. We were all different, but we all shared the same vision of what we, and which was really just to grow the organization and take care of the people that we had. No, I learned a lot from them. It also gave me the opportunity, especially in a multinational such as HP. I found myself there was always someone better than me, and because of that opportunity, I could learn some. I could learn and be mentored by people who were much better than me, right? And then when I went into non-HP corporate, I also saw. I learned a lot as well. No, as I shared. No, I think again, all of these are experiences, and in Muchi's words, these are all data points that I take. That things I should not do, things that I could do, right? And then going into when I got the opportunity to build my own, I took all of those learnings and tried to make it the best it can be based on what I felt was best for it. So I hope that answers your question, Mooch.
Yeah, actually, super duper helpful. I mean, I was, I asked that question thinking of people who are in corporate right now and wanting to jump. But what you just said also just gave folks, Gen Zs who are early in their careers, really great advice to, because I totally agree with you that you really need to go to corporate first before start. I mean, I would say that if you go to corporate first before you start your business, it'll help you grow your business much faster. Because honestly, like with anything and everything that I've been able to do outside of my corporate life, I didn't really invent anything. I just took
Mm.
I took from the data points. I took from the learnings and the best practices that I had working in a CMMI level 5 corporation like Hewlett Packard. And I just applied that. And it was that process maturity. It's like that muscle of knowing what to do in a second because you've been trained in such a high mature environment and being able to adjust in the wild, wild west of startup life is exactly what I just did. And anyone here listening, like Gen Z's listening right now, totally underrated career path. Like, we have to explain that now, right? That you guys should try to work in corporate because Gen Z's are so they're more pro the unconventional career path. Like that's their
Mm.
default compared to us. Like I didn't have another choice. I mean, working in corporate was like the acceptable norm during my time. But now the Gen Zs, they're like all sorts of unconventional career path. But I would still say that I think it might be painful for the first 5 or 10 years that you're in corporate, but that is going to give you so much muscle memory in terms of that that snap decision of problem solving, of critical thinking, of high mature processes, you know, that when you start your own business, then you're just going to have to apply all of those things that you've learned in muscle memory. And yeah,
Yeah.
that was what I took from what you guys had built in Hewlett Packard.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I did have another conversation with an undergrad recently, and he was already thinking he'll go straight into masters from graduating, because it will make him more attractive. And I told him no, um, you're you should get corporate experience first, but be clear, you're not going in there because you want a high paying job. You have to change your mindset that you're at, especially at an early age, you're going into corporate with the intent to learn. You have to be intentional on what you want to get out of that experience. And then when you take up masters, you will now have all of those experiences that you can then add value to the next stage of learning, which is if you're going to take up your masters or if you're going to start up your own business. Um, take that painful 3 to 5 years of corporate life, but be intentional of what you want to learn from it. It's not a it's not something, not just something, part of your life that you will give you a salary, but again, our favorite term for today, get be intentional on what data points you want to collect, right?
Collect
So
data,
yeah.
guys. But we're not telling you to steal company data. That's right. We're just telling you to gain experience as your data point. But totally sage advice, Mark. And I would say that was the same advice that my parents, my aunts, my cousins told me. I listened. After 10 years, after 15 years, I went back to school and I went back to taking courses. I've never appreciated it more because then you have that depth of experience and you have that lived experience to to match and pattern match with the theoretical discussions in
Thing.
classes in the case study. So highly recommended, guys. And also because even if you have a master's, it's not an immediate bump in your salary. People still look at experience more than just, what you had in your masters. So I'd say if that's the motivation, then I'd say like take a job, and then go back and get your masters. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay, cool. My next question here, Mark, is that for those of our friends and comrades in corporate right now that want to take the jump already, what would be your advice to say that here are the things you need to do before you make the jump to entrepreneurship life? Like you gotta make sure that you have these 5 things before you jump.
Sure. I think the first one, again, if I were to do it all over again and do it earlier, the first thing I would do is look at my financials and my way of life, right? I think, um what is your current state and what's your projected runway? Uh Thinking that I will not have a salary for 6 months or even a year. And what kind of lifestyle should I have in order to really stretch my the savings that I've had built up all the way up to that point so that I can then, you know, take that leap at least with a backup plan in mind. 6 months, maybe I wouldn't say even 6 months, maybe at least a year, and you will have to tighten your belts. I would say change your lifestyle a bit. Maybe um, not really like stop buying Starbucks or stuff. But if you have things that buying an iPhone every year uh, is not really something that you probably need and can give up for the sake of being able to take that leap, right? The other thing I think is that, um, as compared to as compared to what I did, I probably wouldn't jump into entrepreneurship with at least with not having a business idea in mind. Because I made that leap with no parachute, guys. So I made that leap with no parachute. But somehow the dots connected and I found myself to where I am today. So at least have some sort of business idea, I think. And and also start researching on, of course, what are the different aspects of what it takes to build a startup. So you can attend events. There's a lot of like startup shakers. What I also appreciate is that, you know, there's, I think the startup community in the country is booming and alive. So you'll be able to attend a lot of free seminars, a lot of free events, and it's just listening and to people who have gone through that experience, and with the intent, of course, of learning their own journey, what were the ups and downs, um, and I guess having a some sort of plan in place. No, of course, you now understand what your financial situation is going to be, understand what your business idea is going to be, and then having some sort of glide path. And then I think the final step would be finding finding the right co-founder. Take the time to look at your network and see who could augment what my strengths and weaknesses are, right? And more importantly, who whom would I trust? Who has the same value system that I do? I think that is also very important. No, I've heard a lot of like horror stories out there. Uh so making sure that you when you find a right co-founder that you trust who would augment what your strengths and weaknesses is, and of course someone who would buy into the vision of the future of the product could be. So I think those are the 3 or 5 steps. I lost count how many steps there were, but
I
yeah,
took
those
notes.
yeah.
Number one is have a runway. I totally agree. When I had left corporate, I made sure that I had at least 1 to 2 years of savings. Then the reason for that was I wanted to be able to walk away anytime. Meaning to be able to walk away is such, if you enter startup life, you need leverage. Like you need leverage for yourself. So the more leverage that you've been able to build for yourself, the better deals that you could create. Meaning you will never be pushed, your back will never be against the wall. So
Yeah,
totally agree. Number one is
that's
that
right.
if you guys want to go to startup life, build your leverage. And building your leverage means he's totally right, Mark. Saying goodbye to frivolous purchases, like upgrading your iPhone every year. Say goodbye to that, man. Say goodbye to any luxury items that you want to buy. I mean, your salary in a startup is only aligned with what the revenue of the startup would be. So it would be subject to the realities of business. So be ready for that. Build leverage for yourself. And the more leverage you've been able to build for yourself, the better it is for you to walk away when, not a good deal is being struck on the table. But I would say for every sacrifice that I've been able to make, there's nothing compared to like the freedom of owning your time, right? I mean, as you said, you want to be there with your kids, you want to be able to see them in the morning, hug them in the afternoon, right? Talk to them during dinner time. There's no buying that. No expensive
No
iPhone would
buying that.
ever, yeah, would ever replace owning your time as an entrepreneur. And totally agree. And you also said like finding the right co-founder, finding the right person or people in your startup with values aligned. I would totally also like really agree with this one because if finding a co-founder is not just like, hey bro, let's start a business. It's almost like a marriage. It's like
It's a
it's
marriage.
deeper
It's
than
a marriage.
anything. It's a marriage, right?
Mm.
It's deeper than any other. Like next to your marriage, this is like the second most important relationship of your life. Because
Yeah,
literally,
totally agree.
like a marriage, you guys would need to manage the fund, deploy the funds, all of that and operate the business together. And there would be a lot of fights. And those two person or those three people need to be able to fight it out and then be friends afterwards. So having good co-founders, having good partners in business is so
Mm.
important as well. And if
Yeah.
I'd say like find good partners. Find good partners with good values and values aligned and everything. So thanks for that, Mark. I bet a lot of folks here would start computing. How much is their freedom number?
You bring up a very good point on freedom. I think when one thing that I do appreciate with that experience that I went through was that when we sat down and looked at our financials and started belt tightening, I realized um, if getting a BMW equaled less time with my family, it was not it was an easy decision to make, right? I mean, uh, so it's then that as you know the saying that the higher your salary gets, your lifestyle tends to, go
Increase
higher
with
as
it.
well.
Yeah.
And it's a never ending race to the top, no? But I realized when going through that, I did appreciate that when we took out all of these other stuff, all of those luxury items, luxury bags, luxury watches, when we took it out and just put there a certain amount for travel and family time, we realized that we didn't really need that much. And as I said, I would never trade the time that I have to be able to fetch my kids almost every day and be present at all of their school events. If it means getting a BMW, it's a no brainer decision for me, right? So
Now, talking about like the frivolous and all of these other things and like the high life of a BMW. But some people go to startup life because they want that life, right? Because they want to build the next unicorn. Because they want to buy
mm,
a BMW, a Mercedes Benz, a McLaren, I don't know, whatever car is there, right? And they want to be another Mark Zuckerberg or another Jeff Bezos
mm,
or another, I don't know, another billionaire out there. And they want the high life. They want the fast life. And
mm.
they want the party life, the startup tech life, the party all night type of life, right? Now, but you've been a founder. This is your second company that you founded and you're building. What do you see in the Philippine startup culture, and where have you decided to steer your own culture in startup life? Are you
Mm.
part of that
Good
party
question.
all night, drink and then code type of culture in the startup life?
Mhm.
Or have you been able to see a better road or a better path there?
That's a great question. Honestly, um, I I rarely seen that culture of the party life here in the Philippines. No, what I do appreciate here is that there's a really good community ecosystem from what I've seen. No, so I've had the privilege to, and I don't know if it's just a matter of coincidence or maybe I'm not attending the right events. No, but I do see that there's a strong community. There are a lot of founders who are very generous with sharing their ideas, sharing their knowledge, or just making, I'll connect you here. You should talk to this person. Tell them that I referred you and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like generous founders, Filipino founders who are very passionate about what not just about what they do, but developing something that can make an impact and impact impact and understanding the realities of what we have here in the Philippines, the Filipino realities. So uh, um to answer your question indirectly, so I think I'm more in that route, in that kind of space where, especially in the education space, I think that's what I've also come to appreciate at least in the people in the startup community that I interact with as far as education is concerned. There's there's real sincerity in seeing how can we make education better for the Filipino child.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks, Mark, for sharing. Last few questions. I know we're over time. Thank you for staying with us. Even though we're over time, if you can give advice to current corporate leaders in building a culture that fuels people's passion and need to innovate, what what would you advise them to do?
motivate people and encourage people to take risks, right? Because I've heard about uh I won't share one what corporate or company that is that people don't want to innovate or take risks because there's always a witch hunt on what went wrong, and it goes into your employment record or in your rating. I think I think having something like that just basically kills any kind of motivation to make a difference, right? But if you have a culture where you encourage people, hey, here's a problem, try to come up with some some solution, right, to try and address a problem or make things better. And then encourage encourage the effort, encourage the innovation, not necessarily the result per se. Of course, that's also valuable, but encourage and highlight and recognize people who, the thinking, the motivation, and how they actually did it. I think that's how I would, that's the advice I would give.
Nice. That's actually very similar to our previous podcast where there was psychological safety to try and learn and experiment as well. So it's truly,
Yeah.
truly,
And
even
also not just focus on the results, like what Mark said, right? Just focus on the process and how he came up into it, the thought process, the thinking process, which is good.
And I
yeah,
think just to add to that, as leaders, instead of like, this notion that, you do this, you do this, you do this, you open your arms and what you ask always your team, what help or support do you need from me? You start off with that. I think that's a very important mindset shift. How can I support you? How can I lift you up? How can I help you become more successful?
These are really good insights, Mark. I know it's a long journey for you from corporate to entrepreneurship. There's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of realizations. Thank you for sharing all these stories. To everyone watching, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode because Mark will be back as we dive into his latest tech startup, Gia, and talk about how AI is reshaping education. So if this episode spoke to you, drop a comment below and share what's holding you back from taking your leap and what lessons you've learned along the way as well. All right, see you guys.
see you.
See you.